Hi everyone, I'm your presenter Alyssa Charrier, and today we're going to be discussing efficient eating. So based on what we learned in the last video, a more sustainable style of eating needs to have limited intake of sugars, empty calories, and overall calories. Additionally, we need to focus on adding whole plant-based materials such as whole grains, whole fruits and veggies, nuts and seeds, and legumes. Today, we're just going to discuss how to actually do this. So first, I want to discuss the concept of nutrient density, which is determined by comparing the nutrient content of a food item with the number of calories a food provides. It's important to remember that a food is considered nutrient dense if it provides a large amount of nutrients for a relatively small amount of calories. So let's go over some examples of this. Our first example, apple pie versus broccoli. So what we first want to look at is calories as a percentage of our daily intake, which is here at the arrow. We're looking in the apple pie. So I can then draw a line across and look at the percentage of nutrients as compared to the percentage of calories. So you can see that for the apple pie, if we were only to eat this for the day in order to obtain the required nutrients, we would have way too many calories. Therefore, apple pie is considered a non-nutrient dense food. If we look at the broccoli, on the other hand, a serving of steamed broccoli only uses 1% of our daily calories, but we get a lot of nutrients, as you can see by the other bars that are above that line. So of these, broccoli is the nutrient-dense food, and you should hopefully choose it more often than the apple pie. Okay, the second example I have is chocolate chip cookies versus a soft drink or a pop or soda or whatever you want to call it. So you can see based on the percentage of calories, neither of these is a very nutrient-dense food. However, if I had to choose between the two, for the one that is the most nutrient dense, I would choose the chocolate chip cookies, because even though there's still some percentage of nutrients down and under that line, okay? So today we'll go over two important skills that will help you to make more nutrient dense choices when you're choosing what foods to eat. These are, first, identifying whole grains, and this is because by selecting whole grains, that's a great way to increase the nutrient density of our food, and it's recommended by health professionals. The second is to identify added sugars. Adding sugars to foods adds calories, a lot of them. So without any added nutrients, and it does this without any added nutrients, and is therefore a key way nutrient density is decreased in a food supply. So let's go over why whole grains are so nutrient dense. The example I'm going to use is the wheat berry, but the principles hold true for any whole grain. So a wheat berry is comprised of three components. The outer layer is the bran. This is what protects the seed and provides B vitamins and trace minerals. Inside the bran is an inner layer called the endosperm, and this is rich in carbs and proteins. The last area is the germ, and this is a small nutrient-rich core that contains antioxidants, vitamin E, and B vitamins, as well as healthy fats. So if we were going to grind up this wheat berry as is, we would end up with whole wheat flour, as shown here, a very nutrient-dense flour. However, what is often the case, and because it makes a lovely white flour that is actually pretty smooth and tasty when you make it into bread, right? The bran and germ are removed, and only the endosperm is ground into what we call refined white flour, which is lacking most of the nutrients that are found in the wheat berry itself. Finally, we can take this refined flour and add in some vitamins and minerals such as iron, riboflavin, niacin, folate, and thiamine, and get a refined enriched flour. Some nutrients have been added back in, but not all. So let's compare these flours side by side. I want you to stop the video and look at the percent daily value for each nutrient and determine the nutritional difference between the three flours we just discussed. So something you'll notice is that the enriched flour actually contains slightly more iron, as shown here in these gray bars, more iron, niacin, and a lot more folate and thiamine than whole wheat flour. However, the refined flour, either unenriched or enriched, does not contain nearly the levels of fiber, magnesium, zinc, or copper that can be found in whole wheat flour. So you want to make a healthy choice, choose the whole wheat flour whenever possible. And this is why. Using whole wheat is more efficient at meeting human needs. It's more nourishing with less food. This makes this choice favorable from a World Health and Food Distribution standpoint. One caveat is that wheat flour does not last as long as the white flour, but you do have a few workarounds. You can store it in the freezer, or you can grind the flour as you need. So now I'm going to take you through a few examples to help you identify whole grain choices. The most important rule to follow is that whole grain must be the first ingredient on the list, and whole, whatever grain you want to fill in the blank there. So the first is, I'm going to look at Harper's homemade bread, which is delicious. So I'm sorry if you don't have it in your area. The first thing you need to do is look at the first ingredient. So here's our ingredient list, and it says 100% whole wheat flour. So this is a whole grain bread, and it's made from that wheat flour we just discussed. The second bread I'm going to look at is the Franz honey and oat bread, and you can see here the packaging looks pretty healthy, but we need to be wise and check out that first ingredient. So it says enriched unbleached wheat flour, and this is like, it's not really whole grain, and it's really like that refined enriched white flour that we spoke of earlier. So if I wanted to choose a more nutrient dense food, I would choose the Harper's homemade bread. Sorry, friends. So let's talk about added sugars and how to detect those. It's important to know that the daily recommended intake of added sugars is 6 to 9 teaspoons, or 24 to 36 grams. So my first example will be milk versus chocolate milk. In one serving of milk, we can check the ingredient list and see there is no sugars of any kind that have been added. But we see that the listed sugars are 12 grams. So what is important to know is that in milk, these are what we'd call naturally occurring sugars, and therefore aren't considered added. This is our baseline. Now let's look at the chocolate milk. Same serving size as the regular milk. We can see that there are now additional ingredients added, including second on the list, high fructose corn syrup. This is a sweetener and a source of added sugars, which is true because our glass of chocolate milk now has 22 grams of sugars. So how do we know how much is added? Simple. We know that the milk has 12 grams of naturally occurring sugar. This is not added. This means our chocolate milk with 22 grams has 10 grams of added sugar. We also know that 4 grams of sugar is the equivalent of 1 teaspoon. Okay, 1 teaspoon of sugar. This means in 1 glass of chocolate milk, there are 2.5 teaspoons for every 8-ounce glass. Okay. Another example I'll use is cereal. So shredded wheat is on the left is a 100% whole grain cereal. Therefore, we should not find any added sugars. And as you can see here, we don't. So now let's frost those shredded wheat squares to get frosted mini wheats on the right. We now have 21 grams of added sugar. This means we have 21 grams of added sugar, or 5.25 teaspoons in just one serving of this cereal. So to help us with this in the US, we now have some new labeling laws as of this year, as of 2020, and added sugars has to be listed as part of the daily value. So this will make looking for added sugars much easier. My last example is soda. So a 20 fluid ounce or 590 ml bottle of soda has 65 added grams of sugar, and all the sugar is added in because soda does not have natural sugars. In fact, it's usually just some type of water with sugar and flavoring added in. This is the equivalent of drinking 16 teaspoons of sugar and is way more than that 6 to 9 teaspoons of total daily recommended sugar intake for a day. And I can guarantee that some of you are drinking way more than this in a day. I want to state, first of all, that processing food to the point we no longer have any nutritional value is a developed country issue. We see a completely different reality in developing countries where the struggle to just have enough to eat is real. And in fact, generally what they are eating in those countries is low in sugar and whole grain. It's just not enough calories. So I'm going to compare 2 breakfasts between southeastern Ethiopia, which is a developing country, and the US, which is a developed country. Potential breakfast in Ethiopia could look like this: 1.5 cups of quiche, and this is a whole grain cracked wheat, which is cooked with some salt and a little bit of butter. A potential American breakfast could look like this: 4 4-inch pancakes. I promise I do not eat this way every day. But this is an American style breakfast, probably made with refined refined white flour, as shown here, and slathered in a lot of syrup and a lot of butter, which is a lot of added sugar and fats. Additionally, you'll have a cup of juice, and this has some vitamins, right? But all the benefits of eating that whole fruit, including the fiber, is removed. The difference between these two is that the southwestern Ethiopian breakfast still retains original nutrients from eating whole grains, and it only has a little added fat, but it often doesn't provide enough calories or variation. The US diet, on the other hand, has a lot of extra calories, but has a loss of nutrients from refinement and from refinement. Okay, so Our goal in helping developing countries as become wealthier is not to help them to follow the trends of eating patterns in developed countries currently. This is an increase in empty calories as we become more wealthy. We want to help them retain a pattern of choosing nutrient-dense foods as they have the ability to increase their caloric intake. So with this goal in mind, let's compare the current breakfast of the southeastern Ethiopia with a better breakfast as the country's income increases. So in this scenario, they would still eat kinche, which is a really healthy, whole grain cracked wheat cereal. They would still have a little salt and a little butter, but now we could potentially add a whole mango, like a whole fruit such as a mango, and a healthy source of protein such as an egg or cheese. And we've now successfully added more volume, variety, and calories without losing nutrients. So as usual, I hope you're now trying to ask yourself what this has to do with yourself, or what this has to do with me, right? So I think two principles are important here. The first is found in 1 Corinthians 16:19, where Paul tells us this: "What? Know you not that your body is a temple of the Holy Ghost which is in you?" So it's important. My body and your body, they're temples and gifts from our Heavenly Father. So the choices we make when we choose what foods to eat and how to treat our bodies does matter. The second is Helaman 4:12-13. We have a responsibility. It says, "It was because of the pride of their hearts." So this is actually, I'm just going to take you back. This is the Nephites who have become very wicked and lose the Lord's help because of their choices. And so it goes on to say, it was because of the pride of their hearts. It was because of their oppression of the poor, withholding their food from the hungry, and so on. There was more on this list. And because of this, their great wickedness and their boastings in their own strength, they were left to their own strength. So not only do we have a responsibility to take care of our own bodies, but we have a responsibility to care for the poor and needy and ensure that they're getting healthy and nourishing foods to eat in our own countries and regions and throughout the world. And this is done so that we can have the strength of the Lord behind us, which is super important. So those just some things to consider. I'll see you next time.